$38 trillion. That's America's national debt right now, today, at this very moment. $38 trillion. If you think that number doesn't affect you personally, if you believe this is just some abstract government problem that economists worry about, you're about to discover why you're catastrophically wrong. Because what's happening right now isn't new. It isn't unprecedented. And it sure as hell isn't unpredictable. This exact pattern has played out 3 times in the last 300 years. 3 empires, 3 reserve currencies. Same exact sequence, same stages, same mathematical inevitability. And every single time, it ended the same way. Controlled demolition of the currency, transfer of wealth on a scale that redefined global power, and millions of people who never saw it coming. By the end of this video, you'll understand exactly what stage we're in, why the window is closing faster than anyone in mainstream media is telling you, and what you can do about it before it's too late. Let me show you the pattern. Throughout history, every dominant empire with a reserve currency has followed the same 4-stage debt cycle. Not similar, identical. Here's how it works. Stage 1, productive debt and economic dominance. The empire is ascendant. Debt is taken on to build infrastructure, fund innovation, expand trade networks. The debt-to-GDP ratio is manageable, typically below 60%. Creditors are eager to lend because the empire's currency is backed by genuine economic productivity, military strength, and institutional trust. The debt creates real value. This is productive debt. Stage 2, imperial overreach and military expansion. The empire, drunk on its own success, begins to overextend. Military expenditures explode. Foreign wars drain the treasury. The debt-to-GDP ratio crosses 80%, then 100%. But here's the key. The empire's currency is still the global reserve, so it can print money without immediate consequences. This creates a dangerous illusion that debt doesn't matter, that the rules of economics don't apply. Stage 3, unproductive debt and crisis management. This is where it gets terminal. Debt is no longer funding growth. It's funding interest payments on previous debt. The empire is borrowing to pay its credit card bill. Debt-to-GDP ratios surge past 120%, sometimes 150%. Economic growth stalls. Creditors get nervous. The empire responds with monetary debasement, quantitative easing, currency devaluation, inflation. The pattern is unmistakable. Stage 4, currency crisis and controlled demolition. The endgame. Creditors exit. Capital flight accelerates. The reserve currency status begins to erode. The empire has 2 choices: catastrophic default or controlled devaluation. Every single time, they choose option 2. The currency is systematically destroyed to inflate away the debt. Wealth transfers from the middle class to those who saw it coming and positioned in hard assets. That's the pattern. 4 stages. No exceptions. Now let me prove it. Let me take you back to 16th century Spain, the most powerful empire on earth. Silver from the Americas flooded their treasury. Their currency, the Spanish real, was the global reserve. Sound familiar? Stage 1, productive expansion, 1550-1580. Spain controlled the world's silver supply. They built universities, funded expeditions, dominated European trade. Debt-to-revenue ratio stayed manageable at around 50%. Every European monarch wanted Spanish reals. The currency was trusted, backed by tangible wealth. Stage 2, military overreach, 1580-1620. Then came the mistakes. Wars with England, the Netherlands, France. The Spanish Armada alone cost the equivalent of 3 years of revenue. Military spending reached 75% of the annual budget. Debt-to-revenue ratio hit 200%. But Spain kept borrowing because they could. Their silver-backed currency still commanded respect. Stage 3, debasement begins, 1620-1640. Here's where it gets interesting. Spain couldn't service its debts with tax revenue anymore. So they did what empires always do. They debased the currency. They mixed copper into silver coins, reducing silver content by 50%, then 75%. More coins in circulation, same amount of real wealth. Textbook monetary debasement. Inflation exploded. Creditors fled. Stage 4, collapse of reserve status, 1640-1650. By 1647, Spain defaulted on its sovereign debt for the 9th time in a century. the 9th time. The Spanish real lost its status as Europe's dominant currency. The Dutch guilder took over. Spain never recovered its economic supremacy. Check. Verified. Public historical record. Same pattern, stage by stage. Now fast forward to the 20th century. The British Empire. At its peak, it controlled 25% of global landmass, 25% of global population. The pound sterling was the world's reserve currency for over 100 years. Then came the exact same cycle. Stage 1. Victorian prosperity, 1850-1900. Britain's debt-to-GDP ratio in 1870 was around 40%. They built railways, telegraph networks, dominated global trade. The pound was as good as gold, literally, because it was backed by gold. Creditors lined up to lend to Britain. Stage 2. World War I overextension, 1914-1920. World War I devastated Britain's finances. They borrowed $4.7 billion from the United States, an astronomical sum. Debt-to-GDP ratio exploded from 44% in 1914 to 127% by 1919. Military spending consumed everything, but the pound was still the reserve currency, so they kept borrowing. Stage 3, unproductive debt era, 1920-1939. Between the wars, Britain wasn't investing in productive capacity. They were servicing debt. Debt-to-GDP ratio stayed above 140% throughout the 1920s. When the Great Depression hit, it got worse. By 1933, they abandoned the gold standard entirely. Currency debasement had begun. Stage 4, dollar takeover, 1940-1950. World War II was the final blow. Debt-to-GDP ratio peaked at 259% in 1947. Britain was broke. In 1944, at Bretton Woods, the pound sterling was officially replaced by the US dollar as the world's primary reserve currency. The empire was over. The pattern had completed. Same sequence, same stages, same outcome. Check, verified, undeniable. Let's look at something more recent, more documented, and chillingly similar to where America stands today. Japan. Stage 1, economic miracle, 1950-1980. Post-war Japan was a productive debt machine. They borrowed to rebuild infrastructure, to fund manufacturing, to dominate electronics and automotive sectors. Debt-to-GDP ratio stayed below 60% for 3 decades. Their currency, the yen, was stable, trusted, strong. Stage 2, bubble economy expansion, 1980-1990. Then the bubble. Real estate prices quintupled. Stock market soared 400%. Japan's government spent wildly on public works projects, airports, bridges, buildings nobody needed. Debt started climbing, but who cared? Japan was going to own the 21st century, remember? Stage 3, unproductive debt spiral, 1990-2010. The bubble popped in 1990. The Nikkei crashed 60%. Real estate collapsed 70%. And here's the pattern. Instead of allowing the necessary correction, Japan's government went all in on stimulus spending. They borrowed to prop up zombie banks, zombie corporations, zombie real estate. Debt-to-GDP ratio exploded from 67% in 1990 to 220% by 2010. Were they building productive assets? No. They were throwing money at a problem, hoping to inflate their way out. Sound familiar? Stage 4, eternal stagnation, 2010-present. Today, Japan's debt-to-GDP ratio is 264%. 264%, the highest of any developed nation in peacetime history. Their interest rates have been at zero for 25 years. They've printed more money than any nation on Earth relative to GDP. The yen has lost 40% of its value against the dollar since 2012. Japan didn't collapse. They just stopped growing. 3 lost decades. An entire generation sacrificed. That's controlled demolition. The slow, deliberate destruction of purchasing power to manage unpayable debt. Check. Verified. You can look up every number I just gave you. Same pattern, same stages, same inevitable outcome. Now let me show you where the United States is in this exact same cycle. And I want you to pay very close attention, because this isn't speculation. This is documented, verifiable, publicly available data. Stage 1, post-World War II. Productive debt, 1945-1980. America's debt-to-GDP ratio in 1945 was 116%, high because of World War II. But over the next 35 years, they grew out of it. By 1980, it was down to 31%. How? Productive debt. Interstate highways, the GI Bill, NASA, technology infrastructure. Debt that created more wealth than it consumed. Stage 2. Military expansion and war on terror, 1980-2008. Reagan-era defense spending, the Gulf War, Afghanistan, Iraq, 2 decades of expanding military commitments. Between 2000 and 2008, military spending doubled from $300 billion to $600 billion annually. But debt to GDP ratio was still manageable, around 65% in 2007. Then came the financial crisis. Stage 3. Crisis management and unproductive debt, 2008 present. This is where America entered the danger zone, the 2008 bailouts. Quantitative easing, $4.5 trillion printed by the Federal Reserve between 2008 and 2015. COVID stimulus, another $5 trillion between 2020 and 2021. Debt to GDP ratio exploded from 65% in 2007 to 129% today. And here's the critical part. That debt isn't funding infrastructure, it isn't funding productive capacity. It's funding entitlements, it's funding interest payments on previous debt, it's funding emergency crisis management. In fiscal year 2024, the United States government paid $892 billion in interest on the national debt. $892 billion. That's more than defense spending, more than Medicare, more than anything except Social Security. They're borrowing to pay the interest on money they've already borrowed. Stage 3 behavior. Verified. Check the Treasury Department's own reports. Stage 4. The warning signs are flashing red. We're not fully in stage 4 yet. But the warning signs are unmistakable. The debt grew by $2.3 trillion in fiscal year 2024 alone. That's $6.3 billion added every single day. Debt to GDP ratio is now 129%, approaching Japan's 1990s levels. Interest rates are climbing. The 10-year Treasury yield hit 4.7% in 2024, meaning borrowing costs are accelerating. Foreign creditors are quietly exiting. China reduced its U.S. Treasury holdings by 18% between 2020 and 2024. The Federal Reserve's balance sheet is still $7.3 trillion, meaning money printing hasn't stopped, it's just paused. This is stage 3 transitioning to stage 4. Same pattern, same mathematical trajectory, same inevitable endpoint. I know exactly what you're thinking right now. I've heard every objection, every rationalization, every reason why America is somehow immune to the pattern. Let me address them one by one. Objection 1. The dollar is the world's reserve currency. It's too big to fail. Wrong. The Spanish real was the reserve currency for 100 years. The pound sterling was the reserve currency for 150 years. Both collapsed. Reserve currency status isn't permanent. It's conditional. It depends on economic productivity, creditor confidence, and fiscal responsibility. America's losing on all 3 fronts. Objection 2. We can just keep printing money. Modern monetary theory says deficits don't matter. Catastrophically wrong. Weimar Germany tried this in the 1920s. Zimbabwe tried it in the 2000s. Venezuela tried it last decade. Every single time, the result was hyperinflation and economic collapse. You cannot print wealth. You can only debase the currency and transfer wealth from savers to debtors. Objection 3. Technology and innovation will grow us out of the debt. Britain thought the Industrial Revolution would save them. Japan thought electronics and automobiles would save them. Technology doesn't matter if your debt service costs consume 100% of your productivity gains. Right now, the U.S. GDP growth rate is 2.5%. The debt growth rate is 8.7%. Math doesn't care about innovation. Objection 4. They'll never let it collapse. The government will intervene. The government is the problem. Every intervention since 2008 has made the debt worse. Bailouts, stimulus, quantitative easing, all of it added trillions to the debt without solving the underlying issue. You can't borrow your way out of a debt crisis. That's like drinking yourself sober. Objection 5. This time really is different because America has the strongest military. Spain had the strongest military in 1600. Britain had the strongest military in 1920. The Soviet Union had the strongest military in 1985. Military power doesn't prevent economic collapse. It often accelerates it by draining resources. America spends more on defense than the next 10 countries combined, and it's all funded by debt. Every single objection has been tried, tested, and failed in history. Same pattern, same excuses, same outcome. Based on the historical pattern and current trajectory, here's what the next 10-25 years likely look like. Phase 1. Accelerating debt spiral, 2025-2028. Debt continues growing at $2.3 trillion per year. Interest payments exceed $1.2 trillion annually by 2028. Foreign creditors continue slow exit. Dollar remains reserve currency, but confidence begins eroding. Phase 2. Monetary debasement, 2028-2032. Federal Reserve forced to choose between default and inflation. They choose inflation, always. Quantitative easing resumes. Real inflation, not CPI but actual purchasing power loss, hits 8 to 12% annually. Middle-class wealth evaporates. Phase 3. Currency crisis, 2032-2037. BRICS nations, China, and other creditors accelerate dollar exit. Alternative reserve systems emerge. Dollar loses 30-40% of purchasing power. Gold, Bitcoin, hard assets surge. Phase 4. Controlled demolition or replacement, 2037-2045. Either the dollar undergoes controlled devaluation, likely, or is replaced as primary reserve currency, possible. Either way, the result is the same. Wealth transfer on a scale not seen since World War II. This isn't conspiracy theory. This is pattern recognition based on 300 years of documented history. Let me be absolutely clear. I'm not telling you the sky is falling tomorrow. I'm showing you a pattern that takes decades to play out. But the actions you take in the early stages determine whether you're positioned as a victim or a beneficiary. First, reduce dollar-denominated risk. If 100% of your wealth is in dollars, dollar-denominated assets, or dollar-based institutions, you have concentrated single currency risk. Diversify. That doesn't mean abandon dollars entirely. It means don't have all your eggs in one basket. Second, understand real versus nominal returns. A savings account earning 2% while real inflation is 8% means you're losing 6% purchasing power per year. Nominal returns don't matter. Real returns after inflation are all that matter. Third, position in hard assets. Throughout every currency crisis in history, 3 asset classes have preserved wealth: precious metals, gold, silver, productive real estate, and inflation-resistant commodities. Not speculation. Preservation. Fourth, build international optionality. Having assets, accounts, or residency options outside your home country isn't paranoia, it's smart risk management. The pattern shows that capital controls, taxation, and restrictions accelerate during stage 4. Fifth, increase your economic productivity. In inflationary environments, your earning power matters more than your savings. Invest in skills, businesses, and income streams that can't be inflated away. Sixth, study the pattern yourself. I've linked every historical source, every treasury report, every data point in the description below. Don't take my word for it. Verify it yourself. The pattern doesn't care whether you believe it. Seventh, prepare, don't panic. This pattern takes decades. You have time, but the window is narrowing. Every year of delay means fewer options, higher costs, and less flexibility. $38 trillion, that's where we are today. It was $28 trillion just 4 years ago. It'll be $50 trillion within a decade at this rate. And every single time this pattern has played out in history, it has ended the same way. Controlled demolition of the currency, transfer of wealth from those who didn't see it coming to those who did. The pattern doesn't care about your politics. It doesn't care about your beliefs. It doesn't care whether you think it's fair or unfair. It just happens. Stage 1, Stage 2, Stage 3, Stage 4, every time, without exception. The only question is whether you'll see it coming. If this video gave you a different perspective on what's happening right now, hit that subscribe button, click the notification bell. Because in my next video, I'm breaking down the 3 specific asset classes that outperformed during every historical currency crisis, with exact allocation strategies and timelines. The pattern is clear. The timeline is accelerating. The window is closing. Check. Verified. Undeniable.